Welcome to the clinical cookout. You know you need it, it's kinda scary, but mental health is necessary. Four educated queens taking the lead, hold their hands and they'll help you succeed. Lay your head back, relax, just like that. Now listen to, learn, and your problems will burn away. Cookout, you know, we got just what you need. At the cookout, your heart and mind we will be. At the cookout.
This podcast is for educational purposes only. We are qualified clinicians who will cover various topics on mental health and will sometimes provide community resources. We are not being paid by any organization for our content, and any information we provide is general and pertains to our own personal experiences. We do not provide psychotherapy, diagnoses, or treatment recommendations on air. Any concerns related to your individual mental health should be directed to your medical and mental health professionals. We are not responsible for others' decisions or the subsequent consequences.
Welcome back to the Clinical Cookout, y'all. We have a very interesting topic today. Our main dish is going to be about how people weaponize certain therapy terms. But for the hot sauce, we're going to talk about one term in particular. This is a newer term. Well, not super new, but it was coined back in 1998. And a lot of people use this term. It is neurodivergence. Aunties, what do y'all think about this? Do y'all think that this term is used way too much? Do you think it's used just enough? Is it a clinical thing? Do you guys use this term? What do y'all think about it?
Okay, so before we even go into that, it might be good to know what it exactly means to see if we think it's overused too much based off what it really means. So, like Auntie Amber said, the term was coined in 1998, and it was coined by an autistic sociologist named Judy Singer as an alternative to deficit-based language such as disorder. So she didn't want to say people had a disorder. She highlighted the notable strengths of many individuals in the autistic population that include abilities to focus, recognize patterns, and remember factual information. So the term neurodivergent refers to a person on the autism spectrum, or more generally to someone whose brain processes information in a way that is not typical of most individuals. So that's the basis of it. So now.
And that's the problem. That's exactly the problem. Everybody thinks that they are part of that group or feel like they're pushed under this umbrella. And I think that with social media being the way it is, the term neurodivergence has spread very fast. Because when I first heard it, nobody was using that term but the autism community. Nobody was using that term. And the next thing you know, it got out Twitter, all these other places got a hold of this term, and now everybody's neurodivergent. Do I think that everybody has different brains? Yes, but that doesn't mean you fall underneath this clinical category. And I feel like the definition is being stretched, and now people are just accepting that. And I'm just like, I don't really know if I want to use that term, especially me being in clinical work. I don't know if I want to use that term with everybody, because that's not what the original term was used for. So I think it's just important not to spread this in places that it doesn't need to be spreaded to.
Yeah, I agree with Auntie Keish. I typically only use it with people who are diagnosed on the autism spectrum still, which is its original use. I think people are using it as a sub-diagnosis for themselves. Like, I'm neurodivergent so that other people can understand them better, or so that they don't come off as weird or different. It's like, this is what I am. And it's like, that's not a term for a diagnosis. And I'm seeing, it's funny, it started with the autistic community, and now I'm seeing a lot of ADHD individuals use it a lot. Like, that's where I'm seeing it being used the most, and it was never intended for people with an ADHD diagnosis. I can see how it could be, because your brain still kind of works different. Everybody's brain works different to an extent, but it's being used, like Auntie Keisha said, it's being stretched so much, it's going to start to lose its effect, if that makes sense.
I agree. I think that the term is overused. I do agree that I like the term. I like the fact that there has been kind of like a label put on this, because we use the term neurotypical in clinical settings. So I do a lot of psychological evaluations, and whenever I give feedback or explain the results, I don't like to use the term normal. So instead of using the term normal, I'll say neurotypical, what we would typically see for someone with a typically developing brain, right? So I do like the idea that there is a term to use for that. I don't use it in the clinical setting because I don't view it as a clinical term. I haven't really seen it in a lot of the research that I've looked into. But I also agree that it's overused. So when we talk about neurodivergence, the neuro part is the really important piece. It's your brain, and your brain works differently, not just because you're a little quirky. I feel like it doesn't give people the chance to just be quirky and odd. You have people that are just quirky and they're not neurodivergent. It's not a clinical thing. It's not like a whole thing. It's just you're a little odd, like you're a little weird, and that's okay. But when we talk the neurodivergence, like your brain is literally working differently. Like for people with autism, there are certain parts of the brain that are either enlarged or smaller, or I know that for autism, your brain gets really big when you're younger and then it shrinks really quickly. So there are different folds. So your brain literally works differently and processes information differently, specifically sensory information. So I do understand why that term is used in the autism community, but I don't understand why it's been spread out across like anything. Like if you just have any little quirk, then you're neurodivergent. I don't like that part about it.
I think that people use it because they want to explain away, like they're having some sort of identity crisis a lot of times. They don't understand why they can't talk to people and feel normal, which is a lot of times social anxiety. They don't understand why they constantly go over things and rehearse it over and over in their head, which a lot of times is social anxiety after they have had conversations. And a lot of times autism is confused with social anxiety. So when people feel like they are just different or they don't function like everybody else or certain things make them nervous or they have a hard time talking to people, then they like to say, oh, I'm neurodivergent. And then I think a lot of times other people like to be different. Being different right now is cool. You go on TikTok and they'll say, you know, you're neurodivergent if, and then they name all these regular traits that regular people have. And then people are like, oh, you know what? I'm neurodivergent. That's the way my ADHD brain thinks. That's the way my autism brain thinks. When in reality, everybody has some little quirks that might look autistic to everybody.
I'm glad at the end, Brian, you said that. Like we are people just allowed to be quirky or awkward anymore. And it doesn't seem like it because of the negative connotation that we give those terms though. Because like words mean things. But it's never been like a good thing or a fun thing to be awkward or quirky. So now this term helps it to sound better. Like, no, I'm just neurodivergent. And it sounds like, I don't know if it sounds more clinical or smarter or something, but it's like it was bad when we were growing up to be the weird kid. So now we have a word for the weird kid, and now everybody wants to use that word to describe themselves because it just honestly probably makes them feel better than saying
I had a
I'm just a
patient.
little off or a little odd or a little awkward.
I had a patient who literally fired me because I would not diagnose her with autism. Like she was big mad, but she was having identity problems. She couldn't understand why she was the way she was. She was the weird kid, and everybody let her know that she was weird, but she just wasn't autistic. She didn't meet the criteria. So I was you don't meet the criteria. You're looking me directly in my eye. You're not having any problem asserting yourself. So when I would affirm her and say, you was assertive in that situation, she's like, no, I literally didn't understand what they were saying to me. And then she just kept being like, when people talk to me, I don't understand. Like even right now, when you're talking to me, I'm not really taking in what you're saying. And I was like, that's autism. People with autism just don't work like that. It's not just something that you just claim and then you tell the therapist, hey, I think I'm autistic. And then the therapist says, you know what? You are autistic. There's diagnostic criteria that needs to be met. And she didn't meet it. And because of that, she was like, I don't think that you take my diagnosis seriously. And I'm sorry, I can't be here anymore. I need somebody who will listen to me. And so she probably went and found somebody who was going to diagnose her. Or she probably dumped the next therapist too, because she wanted to know what was going on with her.
Yeah, and I understand that it's something that people use to try to explain things that they don't know how to explain. I just don't like how it's just used so much on social media when, like I said, neuro means brain, right? So a lot of these disorders like ADHD, autism, intellectual disabilities, those are all within the neurodevelopmental category. So yeah, that means your brain is working differently. Literally, your brain is working differently. But if you fall outside of that category, like Auntie Shug was saying, just anxiety, that's situational. So that doesn't mean that your brain is working or firing differently. It just means that whatever's going on at the time is difficult for you to handle. That does not make you neurodivergent.
You know what's interesting though? Is that this is almost the reverse, especially if we consider our community, right? Like historically, we have talked before about how, maybe back in the day, people didn't want to go get their kids diagnosed when they really actually needed to be diagnosed, right? So now you have more people trying to embrace the fact that they're different, when back then it might have not just been like, we had people back in the day who were like, nah, he just different. He just weird. He just weird. It's okay. Ain't nothing wrong with him. When it might have really been something wrong with him and they wouldn't go get him tested. So now it's almost like the reverse. He just weird, but weird is probably meaning something is wrong. So let's give him this label or give her this label. So it's almost the reverse now. We wanted people to start getting tested and figuring out what was wrong with them. And now they want to do that, but they don't realize that they're stretching a term that wasn't meant to fit everything into it. You can really just be weird. You can be awkward. You can be quirky. It's okay.
It's like an overcorrection. Like we were under diagnosis or misdiagnosing. Now it's this super big swing to overcorrection.
Mm-hmm. But now with that, neurodivergent, neurodiverse, this is not the only term that has become a term that might have lost its original intent. It's a lot of therapy terms that are being misused or overused or whatever. So our main dish is going to be focusing on that, the misuse of clinical terms.
Will burn away. We got just what you need at the cookout. Your heart and mind, we will be.
For the main dish, we'll be talking about the weaponization of therapy terms. So I want to be able to start off and discuss something that annoys me, or should I say, grinds my butthole. Okay, and that is the weaponization of ADHD. My God, I feel like that word got thrown onto the internet and it just blew up. And I can tell you right now, it makes my job a lot harder. I'll tell you that right now, because I have a lot of people coming in, not even coming in, but just a lot of people just thinking that everything a child does, if they don't sit down, is ADHD. And it is probably the hardest thing I have to convince parents that, yes, your child may not be sitting down in their chair because they're children. School is not built around the curiosity of children, which is exploring, touching things, maybe even touching other people and just talking and socializing. That's what their brains are supposed to be doing at that age. But anytime that isn't happening, or anytime that's happening more than maybe the average student, then it's ADHD. And then they're recommending medication. Like, whoa, did y'all even ask the appropriate questions before we even get to ADHD? Like, they're not even asking questions. It's just immediately ADHD. And I think that term has been weaponized for so long that it's starting to bleed over into clinical work that we do. And so if that's my hill I'm going to die on, that's the one. What y'all think?
I agree. And I feel like ADHD has been weaponized so much that when a child actually does possibly have an ADHD diagnosis, you get people who are like, no, because they throw that on everything. Because I remember like my mother-in-law, she works for the school system. She's a middle school math teacher. And she'll hear that and she'll be like, no, all these kids don't have ADHD. Stop. Just don't know. That's not what that is. And I'm like, now you might be pushing it to where somebody really might, but it's like, y'all use it so much, it's just it's lessening who it could help, if that makes sense. Like some people really might, and now people are like, nah, everybody ain't got ADHD.
Weaponized is a term like to use something against somebody, to take it and then use it as a weapon against somebody. Are we using it in the right context? Just a question before I start talking.
Should we be saying overused?
Sometimes I do feel like it's weaponized in a clinical setting and in a school setting. It's weaponized against parents almost sometimes, or the other way around. Parents may weaponize it against teachers because they feel like now when I'm in that space, I feel like there's a lot of pointing fingers at each other instead of actually literally looking at what the child's behaviors are. Parents and teachers are going at it and pointing a finger at each other and using that against, oh, well, my child has this and you're not accommodating my child, or my child or your student is doing this and you're not parenting correctly. So to me, there's a weaponization between those systems, like home and school. That's just from my personal opinion.
No, I agree with that. So that's why I asked the question. So I think that with ADHD, it's hard because ADHD needs to be tested for. Like you can't just be like, oh, you know what? He's not sitting down enough. He has ADHD. ADHD, people don't really understand that it's not a child not sitting down. It's not always hyperactivity. It's not even hyperactivity. It's impulsivity. So the idea that a child might say, I want to touch your butt. I can't touch her butt. I shouldn't touch her butt. I gotta touch her butt. They have to do something. It's not being able to shut up, Amber, to restrain themselves from doing things. That's the impulsivity part. Then you get the part where there's executive functioning differences, and that's what people don't look into. Is the executive function different? Can they not organize themselves? Is it literally affecting them in not only school but at home? In other aspects of their functioning. And I think that that's what people don't look into. So they don't take their kids and go get them tested and actually get really diagnosed. They just say, oh, he has ADHD. And a lot of times the people who are giving people ADHD diagnosis is the pediatricians. And pediatricians are not specialists in this area. So that's like me saying, man, you need to have your bone. I'm gonna do it because I went to medical school, and I didn't really go to medical school. But if I was just a regular medical doctor, I'm gonna do some ortho stuff, even though I'm very, very general. So that's what it is. The PCMs are very general, and they say, you know what, you have ADHD. Let me prescribe you medicine. And then now they take this diagnosis to school, and I've seen so many people who don't really have it. I've tested 3 people in the last 3 weeks that don't have it, but they have medication for it because their primary care doctor gave it to them.
Can I add something to that, Shug? There's also an increase in diagnosing that when it comes to when we talk about medication, when we talk about etiology, people also don't know that the likelihood of you having ADHD is low. Like when you look at the pathology of this disorder and the etiology of it, it's like 2 to 5%. So a lot of these kids and even adults don't have ADHD. It could be something else. And people are not using those differential diagnoses. And there's another issue when we talk about pediatricians diagnosing, which is, yes, a weaponization in the medical field too, or I don't say weaponization, but there's this thing that you were talking about in the medical field. Well, because I'm an MD and people trust their physicians, they immediately go by what they're saying when they don't even have a specialization in it. But I also found out that in social work, it's the same way. They don't use testing. And so if the child is meeting a criteria, they're just like, okay, they have ADHD. And I'm like, that is not how that works when it comes to psychology. So you have, even within the system of mental health, different providers diagnosing this without testing. And all it is, okay, they meet the criteria, boom, they have ADHD. And I'm like, really? That's really? So I feel like weaponization of all these terms, and even if we don't want to use weaponize, I feel like a lot of these terms are explored enough, and it's just an umbrella term when other questions should be asked. A thorough assessment needs to be done.
What I've seen, soft signs, right? And some hard signs and some symptoms. Some of the soft symptoms is like I see a lot of the kids with that I might diagnose, they hide food and like what is it, like sweet snacks and stuff like that, because it's constantly giving them that dopamine rush. So they like hiding it and eating it like throughout the nights and stuff like that. That's just a soft sign. That makes me look like, let's see what else is going on there. Maybe it might be. And then like I said, executive function. They might be the most unorganized person. They might be the messiest person. They might not be able to organize themselves or sit down and pay attention long enough to even complete an assignment. A lot of times their assignments are just blown in the wind, or they might complete it and not even turn it in. It's a big collaboration of things. These are just a few things there, but there's a big collaboration of things before we can even look at it. And so some teachers are just like, you know what? He's not turning assignments. Oh, he looks like he's not paying attention, or they don't even pay attention to what that child is doing when they're not paying attention. My son's teacher didn't even tell me. Like, I was like, what is he doing? Doing his work. She's just like, he's not doing his work. What is he doing when he's not doing his work? They don't pay attention long enough because there's 25 other kids in the classroom to even look and see, maybe he has some executive functioning problems. Maybe he's spacing out. Maybe he's looking at it and don't understand. And then they tell these parents, I think they have ADHD. And then the parents take them to the pediatrician, and then they get a diagnosis. And they come back with a diagnosis of ADHD. And then I got to be the jerk. That's like, that's not what that is. What are some other things that they could have did and undo it?
Yeah, and it's not even always that they get the diagnosis either. It's people that don't get the diagnosis and they see things on social media and they self-diagnose. They're like, oh yeah, I've got ADHD because of this. And then they throw that term around everywhere, right? So we're seeing ADHD so much because of social media. Honestly, that's what I believe. But people are talking about how they're unorganized, and then other people are like, oh, I'm organized too, so I have ADHD too. And it's like, yo, no, that's not what it is. But ADHD is not only the only term that we hear that is overused, right? There are other terms too. And one of the ones, I think we've talked about this in another episode, is narcissism, right? You're a narcissist. You're narcissistic. People love to use that term too, and they do weaponize that as well.
Now that one is absolutely weaponized a lot. You get people who, especially in romantic relationships, that's where I see it the most. Like, I dated or was married to a narcissist. You dated or were married to an asshole, more than likely not a narcissist.
Yeah.
And it gets weaponized because they want to be able to kind of say, I know what it's like. I know what it's like. It's like, no, you really don't know what it's like if you're dealing with somebody truly diagnosed with NPD, which is a very rare diagnosis. Like, I don't think people realize how rare it is and now how common they're trying to make it. It's not common enough for y'all to, out of 10 people, maybe one person has been with a truly diagnosed person with NPD. You might have been with somebody who got narcissistic traits, because all of us fall on the spectrum, and you have to have a touch of narcissism in order to have self-esteem. But you like to use this term for people who are just self-centered. No, they just self-centered. Like, that's all. So we're using it for things because they see one trait of it and they like, yep, that's who it is. And it's like, no, that's not who they are.
Or
So,
because
yeah.
it hurt your or because it hurt your feelings, they had to be a narcissist. I get a lot of people that's like, oh, like you said, in relationships, oh, this person is a narcissist because they keep lying. That don't make you no narcissist, that make you a liar. This person was cheating on me. That don't make you a narcissist, that make you a cheater. People who are narcissistic can have some very other dangerous traits. And it's usually always, there's usually a comorbidity with it. So there's another mental health diagnosis with it. Not just this person was narcissistic and they hurt my feelings. And so now I got to tell everybody they're a narcissist, because one person that does something for you don't do the same thing for somebody else. So he might have been your narcissistic first husband, but he might be somebody's great second husband.
They ain't ready to hear that, so don't do that. They ain't ready.
Yeah, because it was you. He treated you like that. She treated you like that. And you know what? Another thing to go out of the realm of romantic relationships with this term, I get a lot of people who come and say, my mother was a narcissist. My father was a narcissist. I get a lot of adult children who are like, I dealt with a narcissistic parent. And I'm like, are you sure? Like, tell me about it. And then as they're describing, I'm like, no, you dealt with a parent that might have really been undiagnosed in other areas, but they probably wouldn't have got an NPD diagnosis. So that's another one. It's like, no, your mama was just self-centered, or your mom was in competition with you. I see that a lot with moms and daughters. Yeah, your mom might have been in competition with you or been jealous of you, but she wasn't narcissistic.
Yeah, I've had a lot of adults come in and say that too. And like you said, I have them explain to me, like, what do you mean by that? In some instances, it's absolutely not narcissism. It's just a very troubled parent who was having a hard time. Other instances, it is narcissism. And then you have these children who are now traumatized. Oh, and that's another one, right? Trauma, using the word trauma and just slapping that onto any negative experience that you have is trauma. Sorry, I got off. Let's just go with that. Let's just go with that. But trauma, that's another word that is overused. There's clinical, like the way we look at it as clinical or clinicians. But then, like, what does trauma? Because for me, the word trauma means that it was a really negative experience that continues to affect you. You continue to think about it over time. It may not have been like a, violent situation, but for me, trauma can be different for everyone. But if it's something that continues to affect you, I classify that as trauma. But what do y'all think? I mean, I've heard people say something is like traumatic, and I'm looking at them like, your cat scratched you on the arm and that was traumatic. But then I don't want to be judgmental because I'm like, has that affected you in other ways in your life? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. But that's another term that I hear a lot is people just saying trauma.
So I pull people out of pathology. I am not afraid to say, okay, that's a big word. Let's unpack that. And because that's the part of getting people healthy, is taking them out of this pathology where everything is trauma for them, and just being like, well, let's explain it. How did we get there? How did that happen? But the thing, I think a lot of people are overusing trauma because you get a lot of therapists that tell people what should have been traumatic to them. You got a spanking? That was trauma. They inflicted trauma on you. You got dumped? That is trauma. That's emotional trauma. And I think that now people are like, oh man, you know what? That was traumatic for me. That was like this for me, when really they've been living and breathing and been like, I've been okay. And then we're like, no, it's okay to not be okay. There's trauma that happened to you. But if it's not affecting them, and if they don't view it as trauma, then we can't say you're not okay. You had some very traumatic things happen to you. I think we have to let people define what their own trauma is, muddle through and unpack what they say that their trauma is, to let them know, okay, your mother wasn't narcissistic and didn't cause you a whole bunch of trauma because of that. You may have trauma from childhood that might keep affecting you to today, that might, every time you think about it, you might have some physical symptoms, and it might be affecting you mentally, emotionally to today, but it's not always trauma. Sometimes shit just happened and you don't like it, but it doesn't mean it always had to be super traumatic for you.
I agree. And I'm big on, I don't get to tell people what their trauma is. I don't get to measure trauma, like the cat scratch thing. That might have made somebody definitely afraid of cats for the rest of their life. So I don't get to tell them that wasn't traumatic for them, but everything's not trauma. And also, just because, like, as a therapist, if I tell you we need to process this, that don't mean it's trauma. That just means we need to process this current emotion or this current behavior. That doesn't mean it's trauma. People think if you say, let's unpack, let's process that this is trauma. No, let's just unpack and process what's going on right now. That doesn't mean it's trauma. All breakups are not traumatic. All ways your parents raised you are not traumatic. We don't get to tell people if something was traumatic for them, but if it's not having an effect on you still, and it's not showing up in other areas or like manifesting in other ways, then it's just something that happens. Life is a roller coaster. That doesn't make everything traumatic. That makes everything a part of life. You have ups and downs. This is just a down. It's not a traumatic down. It's just a down. So I don't tell people what their trauma is, but I'm just like, was it that bad? Like, you still having the effects of it years later, or even months later? Or is this just an adjustment? That's another thing. A lot of people don't understand that adjustment disorder is a thing. Are you just going through a change, a major change, and you have to adjust. And that's not traumatic. That's an adjustment.
I was just going to say the adjustment. I agree that I don't want to define trauma for other people. But I also think that, again, these clinical terms that people are using, they don't understand differential diagnosis. So I try to focus more on the symptoms. If it's symptoms of trauma, like, okay, how is your body feeling? What does your body do if you're in this situation? What is your body telling you? How do you listen to your body? And if you're having these emotions, I try to normalize having emotions. Okay, you may have been heightened through this situation, but how do we get yourself grounded? What are the interventions that we can use to help you in this situation? How are you even processing or even perceive that situation now after you've experienced whatever event that you've experienced before? So necessarily, I try to not necessarily focus on the word trauma, but what's underneath trauma. Like, what are all the things? I'm pretty sure y'all attended a training where they had that iceberg, and all you see is the tip of the iceberg, but you have all the rest of the stuff below. So those are the type of things I try to like look at, all the things that are below. Like, oh, okay, that might have been an adverse, experience in your childhood. Okay, you had a drunk parent. Now, how do you perceive alcohol? Or you may have gone through racism, because that could be a racial trauma for Black people. Okay, how are we combating that? Let's process some of those interactions that you've had. So instead of using trauma, more using what are those things that's underneath that iceberg that we don't necessarily see, or that is coming out in ways that we haven't really processed before. So, and yes, I do think adjustment is a big one, because I feel like adjustment and versus trauma in childhood is something I always have to explain to parents, because sometimes parents miss over the fact that there's a life-changing event that happens and their child is reacting like it's a traumatic experience, when really it's not trauma. It's just them having a hard time adjusting, maybe to a new partner, maybe to a new move, maybe to just, something that just happened that they just, are having a hard time adjusting to. So yes, I agree with the adjustment terminology, and trauma being a huge umbrella, and to look deep within.
Another thing too to go with that, Keish, is whenever people do, like whenever they have like true trauma, a lot of times there's a bodily sensations that I have to go through. Like they have somatic symptoms that sometimes when they get to talking about their trauma, because I do EMDR too, you actually have to go through it and be like you said, what's going on inside your body, and do a lot of distress tolerance and give them some emotional techniques so that whenever they have that, they can calm themselves down. Sometimes when you just mad at somebody and you like, that was traumatic for me, but it's like there's no other symptoms. Like you said, that's just, we have some things to adjust through. But I think when you actually have true trauma, you need somebody to do those distress tolerance techniques with you so that you can actually work through it, butterfly tapping and all of that kind of stuff.
And it's okay to be, I want people to know it's okay to be sensitive. But when we talking about trauma, is it trauma or are you just hypersensitive? Because you could be hypersensitive to something, and that doesn't mean it was traumatic. It means it's something within you that's taking it differently. But with trauma, another term, and this one is more or less of a people do overuse it, but people use it wrong. If I hear somebody use the term trauma bond wrong, one more time. A trauma bond, and I will say this and die on this hill, and y'all can look it up. A trauma bond is not two people with similar trauma who get together and it's bad. Like, these two people trauma bonding and this is a bad relationship because they trauma bonded. No. Trauma bonding is somebody who is with someone. There has to be an abuser, whether it's emotional abuse, psychological abuse, whatever. Abuse is involved if we are talking about a trauma bond. So stop using that because you hooked up with somebody and both of y'all lost your mamas and now y'all messed up and haven't healed yet and now you trauma bonded over that experience. That's not what a trauma bond is.
So what you're saying is they're bonding through their trauma, but it's not a trauma bond.
Right. That's the difference. Could you bond through trauma? Yeah, absolutely. But that's not what the clinical term trauma bond means. That's not what it is.
I think we can also say, like, how they use like the big T versus the little t. So sometimes big trauma is, we can separate that from your little traumas. And that's another thing. Like Auntie Ashley was saying those oversensitivity. Maybe that's a little, like a small trauma that we can easily adjust to, versus your big trauma. Maybe that's going to take a little bit more processing, a little bit more deeper thinking, a little bit more internal work.
I just find it funny how a lot of these terms start in a clinical setting and then people just take them and run with them. So it's kind of like I do have a therapy client who like, and she knows this, but if I say something to her, if I use a term, she's going to take it, she's going to go research it into the ground, then she's going to start using it as a part of her life and making excuses as to why she can't do things because of this particular term, right? So I can't do that with her anymore. And she knows it. We've had conversations about it. We've laughed about it. But that is essentially how this happens. Like, you take a term, you take something like bipolar, right? That's another one we haven't talked about. You take that term, you get a just a little bit of an understanding of what it means, right? Highs and lows, emotional highs and lows. And then everybody just starts to take it and use it. Oh, you're bipolar, you're antisocial, you're narcissistic, and it just spreads like that. And I'm like, people don't want the education, you don't want the knowledge, you just want to take what you hear from someone else and just start using it like it's just a regular day-to-day term.
I think that's the fault of both clients who learn the terms with their therapists or psychologists, psychiatrists, but it's also clinicians too. Like, granted, social media has its benefits, but now you have a lot of clinicians who hop on social media and they don't fully explain things. They'll say something, but they don't fully explain it. So they have these platforms now, and a lot of professional clinicians, because I follow some people and I'm like, you're not telling them everything about that. You can't just briefly tell them about this, because then somebody gonna take it and misuse it. So if you're gonna talk about it. You gotta fully talk about it. So clinicians getting on here and teaching like brief lessons on things and not fully expounding, or not giving people resources to go look more into it. And then clients who learn it in their sessions or learn it from a doctor, and they like, I know it. And now they teaching everybody on the internet. And it's like, you messed it up.
I tell my clients, now we're gonna talk about this, and don't go Google it. Do not use Dr. Google. Let's talk about it like in this session. And they always laugh because they always know I'm gonna say that. Now you're gonna leave here and you're gonna go on Google and you're gonna see all these people on TikTok talking about the same stuff you're talking about, and that's not what it is. So if you have any questions, come back in here so that you can get some real information about it. But people overuse bipolar, and it makes me mad. They're like, 1 minute she happy, the next minute she sad. That's not what bipolar is.
Like, that's literally not what bipolar is.
It's not what it is.
It grinds my gears when I hear somebody say bipolar and then they only put it to she's in a bad mood one day and then she's in a good mood another day. That is not what that is, folks. If somebody was bipolar, you would know. And I know you would know, because that person has an elevated mood so high that they get ready to put their house on sale. They get ready to empty the whole bank account and your ass gonna be broke. That's the type of shit they own. You would know if you had a bipolar person in your house, okay? You would know, because sometimes people with bipolar, depending on if they have type 1 or type 2, gets hospitalized. Like, people do not understand. Like, people sometimes with bipolar, especially ones, I think it's bipolar 1, where you have the manic episode. That is not just a high and low mood. Manic means you're like that for like 4 days. like people have no clue, and it pisses me off when I hear it, because they are confusing, I believe, that with borderline.
And sometimes weeks.
And what?
Sometimes you can be manic for weeks.
Yeah. Like, what is happening? Like, that's how I know. That's how I know people aren't with real people with that serious diagnosis. And it's a medical diagnosis, by the way. Like, that's literally a medical term. So no, whoever it is don't got no bipolar.
So basically what Auntie Keisha's saying is stop weaponizing bipolar against women who just PMSing. We get PMS and our emotions fluctuate. PMS ain't bipolar.
We get pretty close.
I don't know.
But even if there's a clinical term for that, There's the
No, I know.
PMDD.
I'm just playing.
Right.
I'm just joking.
I know you joking, but I'm talking about for the audience. There,
But
even
it's
if
so.
there's PMDD for that, if it meets the clinical criteria, stop using it.
But you also didn't talk about how you could be manic for weeks and then there's a significant drop and now you're depressed. Because that's another thing too. And you can be depressed for weeks. So you can go from a high to where you're about to put your house on sale or you're moving to Peru. And then the next thing you know, you come back and you're so depressed that you're about to hurt yourself. That's what bipolar looks like. That's what the highs and lows of bipolar disorder look like. And when people say this bipolar weather, it's cute, it's funny. But when you're actually starting to talk about people, I think we do need to be careful. And borderline is my favorite word because I do happen to deal with some borderline clients sometimes. But I think borderline and bipolar are confused. And people look at the elevated, I don't think people know what borderline is. I think people think borderline means just crazy. And I think people use crazy wrong too, because everybody's not crazy. Everybody's not borderline. Everybody's not bipolar. Everybody's not depressed. Everybody's not ADHD. But we use that term. And this is why a lot of people don't go look into what they have, because we think that if you have one of these disorders, or if you have a lot of the etiology of disorders, that everybody is just crazy, instead of actually looking at what goes into borderline personality disorder.
Can I add back to bipolar that we've done an episode on bipolar? So if you would like to go back and look at, take a look at our episode where we go into the criteria of bipolar, of being, manic or depressive episodes. And on top of that, when somebody is manic, they don't sleep. They're like up for like 4 or 5 days. Like, you would know if you somebody that was bipolar. Seriously, you would know. They could be suicidal. They could be when they're really low. Like, there's a lot of grandiose, like there's a lot going on with somebody who is bipolar, and you would know, and they need medication. Like, they need those things to function. So you would know. But go back and look at our episode.
Yeah, our episode 2. And oftentimes, granted, like we'll see things on through TV characters or movie characters, and we will look at it, especially if we're clinicians, and say, well, they're not portraying that right. But it's some things that get it right. So if you want real indicators of an idea of what it really is, like for bipolar, go watch Silver Linings Playbook. I had to watch that movie for class. Like, when we in school, sometimes they give us movies to watch because they show examples, like good examples of what a certain disorder is. Like, if the person you talking about ain't acting like similar to what this movie is depicting, it probably ain't what you thinking it is. And even still, even if you don't watch the movies, if you just look up the criteria of these things, a lot of times it doesn't fit whatever you're talking about. A lot of these disorders, one of the major things that Auntie Amber always says, is it causing distress in several areas of your life? If this person's mood swings aren't causing them to not be able to go to work, to not be able to take care of it, like, they still can function, and they functioning fine. They just have their mood go up and down. That's not a clinical diagnosis. They good. They just got some emotional regulation stuff going on, maybe. But that's not the same as having a clinical diagnosis, especially a clinical diagnosis as major as bipolar 1 or 2 or borderline. Like, you can't just put that type of stuff on people.
Yeah, and I meant to add with bipolar, people with bipolar, they have goal-directed behavior. Like, so it is very, very important when we talk about bipolar that it isn't just about mood. Like, there are other things that go a part of this, and this is what we try to educate the community on, is that, yes, you may know a term, but that does not mean you know the full definition of a term. There's a whole DSM book that we have to go off of, which we don't think that it captures all the cultural things that it should. But for right now, that's the book that we go off of. And there are literally 10, 15 pages associated to one disorder that has all different types of criteria. Like, even bipolar, you can have, I believe, psychosis. I believe so. So, like, there are a lot of things that people don't know that they should understand. That's why we go to school for what we go to school for.
And hypersexuality.
And that's another one that I'm doing a paper on bipolar right now. And hypersexuality is a key feature of bipolar. And it isn't just somebody sleeping around, because I just asked the definition, or I asked somebody, what does it mean with hypersexuality when it's couples? And because I didn't know the definition of that, and then that person was a sex psychologist, and so they were able to describe what that means. But hypersexuality, goal-directed behavior, those extreme elevated moods, like, yes, there's a lot that goes into bipolar, not just mood swings. But another term that gets overused, antisocial. I have no clue why people think antisocial is just not talking to people. Like, where did y'all get that? Do you even know the definition of that?
I be having to explain that all the time too.
He don't talk to nobody. He antisocial. He don't want to be around family. He don't go to no family events. He don't hang out with friends. He antisocial.
What happens if you Google antisocial? What comes up?
Ain't gonna be that.
Well, no. Okay, no. There's two definitions. There's our clinical definition, and then there is not sociable, not wanting the company of others. So
bullshit. They made that up.
In the Oxford Dictionary, that is one of the definitions. Okay.
Because if you break down the words, anti, what does anti mean? Anti typically means against or averse to, and then social. So averse to socializing. It makes sense if you break down the words.
They made that up in the last couple of years.
Listen, when I do evaluations, though, I always explain, because I have people that come in and they're like, oh, I think my kid has antisocial personality or whatever. I do have to explain antisocial is not antisocial the way we use it in society. Like clinically, it is you just anti-social regulations, rules, laws, all of that stuff. But I do think it's funny how like people come in for these evaluations and they're asking for a very specific thing. Like they come in asking for ADHD, they're asking for autism, they're asking for antisocial personality disorder for a 12-year-old. They're asking for these things, and then they get upset with me if they don't get the diagnosis that they want. And as an evaluator, it's different than therapy, right? So if you come in and tell me, I have experienced a lot of trauma in my life, it's not my job as an evaluator to unpack whatever trauma means to you. I'm just going to ask you, okay, what's the trauma? I'm going to list that, and then I'm going to take that and compare it to the criteria to determine whether it fits with any of these trauma-related disorders. And if it doesn't, you don't meet the criteria for it. And people get pissed because they're like, no, I've had trauma. I know I have PTSD. Do you understand what an actual diagnosis of PTSD requires? It doesn't mean just something bad happened to you and now you have nightmares about it. Like there's so much more to it. So it's just like these terms. I find it funny, but I can see why people take these terms and use them, because Auntie Sugar said it a million times. They're just trying to explain their experience. We are just trying to explain our human experience. And if we don't know what terms to use, we're going to take it from somebody who took it from their therapist, whose therapist got it from a book, right? So, yeah.
And that's why I always question the why. Why? Because PTSD is also overused. I got PTSD. You don't even know what PTSD is. You don't. Sometimes your PTSD is trauma, and sometimes
they had a nightmare since childhood. Go on.
Yeah, yes. You ain't got no exaggerated startle reflex. Ain't even had no big T trauma happen to give you PTSD. And then it's just. I digress.
I will say I'm going to admit to one that I have used before I became a clinician. I used to call my mama OCD all the time. I'd be like, Mommy, you OCD. You got OCD. Because all you do is clean up and you pick up everything from the floor, you vacuum, and then you go over it with your hands. You OCD. That's another one. Just because somebody does certain things, or they super clean, that don't mean they got OCD, honey. That OCD is totally different once you see it. And I really feel like if people actually came in contact with a lot of these terms we doing, they would realize, oh yeah, I was messing that up.
No, if they actually came in contact with a lot of the people doing some of this stuff, they would be like, no, something is not right. Something is really off. Yeah.
Right. Right. So, but it's other terms too. We gonna wrap up here in a minute, but I just want to get y'all facial response when I say certain things. Trigger. That's another overused term. It's a trigger for me. Put a trigger warning on that. Take your sensitive behind on. I'm not putting a trigger warning on everything. You be all right. Like no. Gaslighting. Gaslighting. I've been gaslit.
You know where these terms be coming from from some life coaches too. That's where they be coming from. They be coming from the life coaches.
Is we going there? Is we going there? We
I
ain't
had-
going there.
Don't have them life coaches coming over here to our stuff.
Some people
we
do. Some people go straight to their life coach and then they overuse these words too. Because I hear them get overused a lot, and then they're like, it's trauma, it's a trigger, and because a lot of these are not actually clinical terms; they're just buzzwords.
Buzzwords, yes. Toxic. That's toxic. Toxic mean what it means, but everything ain't toxic.
I feel like people be using that one right though, because when they say toxic and then they explain to me what was toxic, I'm like, you damn right that shit was toxic. Yup.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Let's see if there's any more that we could quickly say. Ooh, boundary. Now that's actually a decent word that we use. We have to learn and teach people how to set boundaries. But is that something that gets overused? Like, I got a boundary. Or do people really even know what a boundary is? Because some people think it's a boundary, and what you're giving people is an ultimatum or a rule. These are two different things.
That's it right there. People confuse people confuse boundaries with ultimatums and rules. They confuse those two.
Right. Boundaries are for you. Rules and ultimatums, you try to manipulate somebody into making the choice you want them to.
That's why I be saying weaponization of these words, and y'all don't even know what they mean.
And that's the thing. I don't want people to feel like we're like beating them down about using these words, because I know there are a lot of people that use a lot of these terms on a daily basis, and I get it. And I think that when you've never encountered a person like who actually has bipolar disorder or who actually has whatever disorder or whatever term you're using, if you've never encountered that, then you don't really know what it looks like in real life. So you're kind of just like guessing. Right. So even us as clinicians, before we got into this field, we probably never encountered someone who had schizophrenia or who had bipolar disorder, like was diagnosed with it. So when you actually come in contact with someone with schizophrenia, someone with autism, someone with ADHD, you start to see, and then you see it more. As clinicians, we see it almost on a daily basis. People in the general community, they don't encounter people on a daily basis. So they're just kind of like using these terms, trying to explain life experience. That's not necessarily a bad thing. We just want you guys to educate yourselves on what these terms actually mean before you throw it out at someone else. You want to say it about yourself, go for it. But when you want to weaponize it and throw it at someone else, educate yourself before you do that, because you don't know what that's doing to the other person.
It's slander.
And I'm not trying to put the aunties on a pedestal, but please listen to clinicians. Like, there are other clinicians on social media too. At the very least, listen to clinicians. Don't listen to radio show hosts and people who ain't don't know no more than you do. Like, y'all out here listening to people who using these terms because they've been to therapy and now they have a show, they have something on social media, and you follow that, and it's like none of the people on that platform are professionals. They don't know either, but y'all want to listen to them because they're popular instead of listening to the educated folks.
Stop. They got my eye twitching because I've been saying that for a long time.
Stop it. Like, I love a good podcast. I listen to a whole bunch of podcasts that don't have professionals on the panel, but I listen to them with the knowledge that nobody on that panel is a professional. Like, follow and listen to people like the aunties, and it's several other people that I could tell you are professionals who are telling people the right things or more educated research things. Y'all out here just listening to anybody. And it's like, why are you listening to Derek Jackson tell you about stuff he don't know?
So we didn't over-pathologize everybody. Okay, my bad. We didn't under-pathologize everybody. We did our job. What y'all about to do?